Hello, Mom and Dad. I'm happy to be able to spend a couple minutes talking to you about the Sacrament of Penance, also known as the Sacrament of Reconciliation or going to confession. That is indeed the topic that should be one that you would be engaging your youngster in over the next couple of days, especially as we prepare them to receive the Sacrament of Penance for the first time. The Sacrament of Penance, can be a little scary, perhaps, for a young one. I know going to confession sometimes can even be a frightening experience for adults as well, and yet there's nothing scary or frightening about it. The Sacrament of Penance is a wonderful opportunity that we have as children and as adults to come to the Lord and to come with sorrow for our sins, acknowledging our sins, being able to receive God's mercy, God's forgiveness, and then emerging from the confessional as new individuals. So that's nothing to be scary about, that's nothing to be frightened of. As I said, it's something indeed that one needs to rejoice in. As parents, you have a very special role in this process. I know that for all of us, children and adults, sometimes we see ourselves as not doing anything wrong. We're all perfect, Nobody does or says or thinks things that are inappropriate. Whatever we do is fine. And of course, when we think about all of that, we know that that's not true at all. That all of us know what it is to sin. Even your youngsters know what it is to say no to you when you ask them to do a specific task. You've noticed at times in their life too when they've been uncharitable to their friends or to their brothers and sisters. You've heard them say things that are inappropriate. So you know that they, like ourselves as adults, are sinners. And now it becomes the time for you as parents to take this opportunity to remind them of that and to help them prepare to receive the Sacrament of Penance. What you're going to need to do is to help them make a good examination of conscience, to help them in a way think about some of the things that they've said and done and thought that are not Christ-like, and in helping them to call these things to mind, to assure them that when they go to the priest for the Sacrament of Penance, that they should speak these things to the priest, and not to hold sins back, but to be truthful and honest to the Lord. And in doing so, you are then helping them in this particular exercise or experience. It becomes important also for you to tell them that, when they tell their sins to the priest, that they, in a sense, they tell them to God, and that the priest can in no way violate the sanctity of the confessional, in the sense that the priest can never, and you need to tell the children this, that the priest can never tell their sins to someone else. The priest can never report back to mom and dad the things that he has heard being confessed by a child to the priest in the confessional. That the confessional is indeed something that is secret, that is confidential, that is only between the penitent and the confessor. And so that's another aspect that you need to share with your children. Also, I think it's important for you to emphasize for them that when they emerge from the confessional, that they should realize the fact that with their sins being forgiven and that being in a state of grace, that you need to encourage them now becomes an opportunity for them to act in a different manner, to try harder, to be good and honorable and just and merciful and compassionate, and to try to evoke from them those positive qualities that they might be able to incorporate into their everyday life. Also, one of the things that I think is important for you to do with them, or at least to say to them on my behalf, is to remind them too that, you know, the church provides for us to celebrate the Sacrament of Penance in two different fashions, if you will. Number one is that the penitent can be in front of the priest, sit in front of the priest face to face, okay? Or option number two is that there's a screen that separates the penitent from the confessor, and this adds anonymity, if you will, to the one who is confessing their sins. So the church tells us that there are two ways of celebrating the Sacrament of Penance. One, face-to-face, looking at the priest, and the other one is behind the screen, where there is anonymity between the priest and the confessor. I mean, the confessor and the penitent. So just to let you know about that. Now here at St. Cecilia's, of course, we do offer both of them in the confessional. You'll see one side it says face-to-face, and the other side says traditional. Face-to-face needs no explanation. Traditional, of course, is that side of the confessional where there is a screen. These are just a few of my thoughts from a pastoral perspective that I'd like to share with you. I hope that if you do have any other concerns or questions, that you might be able to see me or Father Cirillo or Father Matt. All of us are very happy to answer your questions. We count on you, Mom and Dad, since you are the primary teachers of religion to your children, to be the first instructors. And of course, we're there to help you along with Mr. Clancy as well. So again, I look forward to seeing you with your children for the celebration of the Sacrament of Penance for the first time. And it happens to be on Saturday, March the 9th at 10 o'clock. And we have a number of priests who are going to help us with this sacrament. So again, God bless you. Thank you for all that you do for our church, for the faith, and for your family.
Hi everybody. We want to take a few minutes here in this section of the video presentation to talk about First Penance, which is coming up very, very soon. First Penance this year for second graders is scheduled for Saturday, March 9th at 10 a.m. in the church. All students who are in the CCD program, as well as in the Divine Mercy Academy School, second graders, are all going to be at this First Penance on March 9th at 10 a.m. Students, when they arrive, should arrive and look for their teachers. So each class will have a section of pews reserved just for them to sit together as a class. Students should arrive at least 10 to 15 minutes before we begin at 10 o'clock, so about 9:45, 9:50 at the latest. Please arrive. Students will arrive, they'll check in with their teachers, so we know that everyone's here. They'll sit together with their class in the front of the church. Parents, you'll be able to sit in the back or the middle to back of the church, and it's open seating, and of course anyone that you'd like to invite is welcome to attend, so extended family, grandparents, godparents, siblings, of course, anyone else is welcome to attend First Penance on March 9th. The program is very simple. We'll begin at 10 o'clock with a short opening song and opening prayer, a short reading from the Gospel. The priest will give a small address and welcome the students and talk with them about what we're about to do and why it's so important. After a few minutes introductory program, we'll begin with First Penance, First Confession, okay? And so students will have two options. We'll have about 5 to 6 priests available for confession, and they'll be scattered throughout the church. So, of course, in the 2 confessional boxes in the left and the right of the church, as well as in the front of the church on either side of the altar, where students can go face-to-face. So students have 2 options for First Penance. They can either go anonymously behind the screen in the confessional box, or they could go face-to-face with the priest in the sanctuary. And so those will be the 2 options. I would recommend for students, especially for their first time, to go face-to-face. Now, of course, it's their choosing, but there's a lot of nervousness and anxiety naturally for a second grader, their first time going to a priest for confession. And so that can be alleviated very much so by being able to see the priest. When students go behind the screen, they tend to have a harder time because they can't see the reaction of the priest or kind of pick up on any of the cues from their facial reactions or kind of encouragement with them face to face. So I would encourage that, but again, that's the choice of each student, and you could talk to your children about what their preference might be. So after we begin with that short introductory program, the teachers will help assist the students to line up and start making their way to the priest. Students will go to the priest, make their first penance, praise God, it'll be wonderful. When they are finished, they'll go back to their pews very briefly to perform whatever the prescribed penance is for them. So usually something very simple, of course we know this, like a Hail Mary and Our Father, something very simple like that. The students will make their penance, say their prayers, and then they're welcome to find you as parents in the back of the church, and at that point they're welcome to leave. You're welcome to leave. There is no formal closing ceremony to first penance, so if your child is first in line, you'll probably be on your way to the diner for a nice brunch at about 10:20 or so. If your child's last in line, it still won't be that late. So usually it takes about an hour in total for everything from start to finish. So usually the last students in line are making their penance or making their first penance by 11 o'clock or so. So it's not too bad. So all in all, even if you're last in line, you'll be out of there not too late. So about 11 o'clock. So the whole service runs about an hour or so. So what should students wear? How do we dress? How do we prepare for this? Well, there's no official dress code for first penance. We would say this, that Sunday best is appropriate. So no shorts or sneakers, flip-flops, or cleats if you have soccer practice after this. Of course, you don't want to be dressing inappropriately. So Sunday best. So some nice pants, a collared shirt maybe for the boys, for the girls, maybe a nicer dress, something that shows a little bit of the reverence and dignity of this particular sacrament. So we want to keep that in mind. But don't become overly concerned about what to wear, but rather something that shows that this is a special event and something that should be celebrated with kind of a little bit nicer dress, if you will. Parents, we will hope to have a priest available for you also to make a good confession. So if you would like to also receive the sacrament, we hope to have a priest in the back of the church in the cry room. Hopefully they'll be able to hear your confession. So if you'd like to go, it's a wonderful thing we've seen over the years for parents to be able to go to confession on the same day as their child makes their first confession. So it's a wonderful family, faith-filled, grace-filled experience. So we hope to have that available for you also. So that covers most of the details for First Penance, which again is coming up very soon, Saturday, March 9th at 10 a.m. Again, arrive a little bit early, 10 to 15 minutes early. Wear your Sunday best. You'll sit with your class and then make your penance. Go back, find your parents, and you're free to go after that. No closing ceremony. So the whole thing runs very, very simple, and it's very wonderful and very beautiful time. Now, a couple common problems that come up, and I'd just like to address them very quickly. Of course, naturally, students will become nervous. How do I do this? What do I do? Now, in the classroom, they've been practicing, and my understanding from our catechist is that the students have been doing really, really well in understanding their basic prayers and kind of understanding the concept of going to confession. How do they speak? What do they say? How do they do this? But naturally, they're going to be anxious in these last couple of days before making their first confession. So my homework assignment for you parents is to practice with your children. Now, I understand, I have children myself, so I understand the temptation sometimes to say, okay, take your homework, go practice, and come back to me when you're done. Well, there's value in that, but there's also more value in us as parents and adults sitting down with our kids and actually praying with them. So, common problems. Students will oftentimes struggle with the basic prayers. At this point in the year, every student should be very, very strong and very good in understanding and knowing their basic prayers. So that includes the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Glory Be, and the Act of Contrition. Now, the Act of Contrition, be careful. I understand that sometimes that one is particularly difficult. For students, and that's understandable. For First Penance, there will be little cheat sheets, little printouts of the act of contrition for them, so they can have that in their hands as they're going into confession. So don't be nervous, don't be afraid if that one kind of is a little bit tricky or stumbles. But the others, the Our Father, Hail Mary, and Glory Be, are very basic and they should know them. Please, parents, practice every single night with them. It's a good habit for us as just Catholic families to do, but especially for these second graders as they're preparing to make their first confession. Other common problems that come up is oftentimes students, when they arrive, will tell us and tell the teachers that they, number one, haven't practiced, but number two, haven't really done any kind of examination of conscience at home. So that would be the second recommendation I have for you, is to help your child think about and recall and come to mind the different things that they've done, the different sins that they've committed. We've all committed sins, but sometimes it's difficult for us to identify them, and it takes a little bit of conscious effort and deliberate intentional thoughtfulness to recall them. And so there's lots of examples, and I'll include in the links here some examination of conscience that you can maybe sit with your child and just ask them these very simple and basic questions and help them to remember. It's not about identifying that they're bad people and that we're bad people, but it's rather identifying the things that hold us back from being as good and as loving and as dignified as we ought to be as sons and daughters of God. So keep that in mind for First Penance. Again, if you have any questions, we can address them, of course, via phone or email. Feel free to stop by the office anytime, and we can help settle any issues with First Penance, which is coming up very soon. Okay, thanks so much. Stay tuned for our First Communion details. Okay, hi everyone. Let's take a look at part 3 of this video, where we're going to discuss First Communion, some of the logistical, scheduling, and practical issues and questions regarding First Communion, how it's celebrated here at St. Cecilia's, as well as some important preparation goals for all of the students and all of the families involved in First Holy Communion this year. First of all, at this point, hopefully you know which date and time you're scheduled for First Communion. We do have 3 CCD classes as well as 1 Divine Mercy Academy class of second graders. So between the 4 different groups, we have 4 different masses. So very quickly, we have on Saturday, April the 27th at 10 a.m. scheduled Miss Gabby Rodriguez class. So Miss Rodriguez is one of our Sunday CCD teachers. So if you're in Miss Rodriguez's class, your First Holy Communion is scheduled for Saturday, April the 27th at 10 a.m. We have rehearsal dates also for each of the classes, so I'll put a link to the schedule in there so you can make sure that you have the rehearsal dates as well as scheduled on your calendars at home, so make sure that we're all there for those important preparation dates. Mrs. Sullivan and Mrs. Lizardo's class are both scheduled for Saturday, May 4th, and so Mrs. Sullivan and Mrs. Lizardo are both CCD teachers on Sunday morning, so if your child is in either of their classes, you're scheduled for Saturday, May the 4th. We do have a bit of a conflict and a bit of a problem that came to our attention just a little while ago. And it's unfortunate, and I apologize for this late notice scheduling update. A wedding was booked at St. Cecilia's, but unfortunately because of some strange communication slip-ups, the wedding date and time and the First Communion date and time conflicted. Now, don't panic, we're not changing the date of First Communion. That would cause, we know, lots of problems with schedules and families and post-Mass plans that you might have with your family. And of course with the wedding, you know, weddings are a big production and very difficult to change time for those. So here's what's going to happen. On Saturday, May the 4th, Mrs. Sullivan's class was scheduled for 10 a.m. That Mass has been moved to now 9 a.m. So I understand it's an hour earlier. It's a little bit more difficult. You have to wake up a little bit earlier. There'll be perhaps a little bit of downtime after Mass, more than maybe you expected or anticipated before your whatever post-Mass plans are. But the alternative was to change the date completely, which again causes far more problems. So I understand that this is not something to be taken lightly. It's not an easy thing, but it is something that we have to deal with because we can't have weddings and First Communions at the same time in the same place. Miss Lizardo's class, which was originally scheduled for Saturday, May 4th at 12 noon, has also been moved an hour earlier. So that will now be on Saturday, May 4th at 11 a.m. And again, I'll have the updated schedules available in the links and notes attachments here too. So take a look at the schedules and make sure we have that slight change in time. So same date, just 1 hour earlier for both of those masses. Miss Rodriguez on Saturday, April 27th, no change at all. But for the two masses scheduled on Saturday, May the 4th, Miss Sullivan's class at 10 a.m. is now 9 a.m. and Miss Lizardo's class at 12 noon is now 11 a.m. So again, I apologize for the scheduling mishap, the miscommunication here in the parish office, but there is a wedding that's coming in at 1 o'clock, and two things can't happen at the same time. So the first communions get bumped an hour earlier. So I understand that might leave some awkward downtime after Mass with your plans, and it might mean having to wake up a little earlier and tell family members to arrive earlier than expected, but the alternative seems like it would be far worse, which would be to change the dates completely. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. Lastly, on Sunday, the May 5th, the Divine Mercy Academy second grade class will have their first communion mass during the 12:15 normal Sunday mass time. So again, just take a double an extra look at the new updated schedule, or the schedule that hasn't changed for 2 out of 4 of the groups. So keep that in mind. Again, there's rehearsal dates for everyone, so take a look at those and make sure you mark your calendar. So those are our schedules. Of course, all students at this point of the year, like I said, with First Penance, should know their basic prayers. Again, keep practicing, keep working with your children at home, praying every day. Truly the most important part of the preparation for students is attending Mass regularly. Sunday Mass is so critically important. If you do nothing else with your family, go to Sunday Mass. It is the source and summit of our faith, going to the Eucharist and being present with our Lord. There's really no substitute for it. There's nothing else in our lives, in our world, that is going to be more important than going to Sunday Mass. And of course, by Sunday Mass, I mean also Saturday evening into Sunday morning, and even into Sunday evening if you need to go to a Sunday evening Mass if it's not here. So keep that in mind. Sunday Mass is critically important. Keep practicing your basic prayers. Also in the links in the attachments are the teaching goals for both First Penance and First Communion. Those have been sent home several times, so hopefully you've been reviewing and refreshing with your child those common basic teaching points about what is the Eucharist, what is the Mass, why is this important, and so on and so forth. Okay, some practical details. So for clothing, what do we wear? How do we dress? What's appropriate? What's inappropriate? Well, for First Communion, there is no strict dress code. There's no strict uniform for the students. Of course, it's a very special and very important, dignified event, and so we want to make sure we're dressing the very best that we can. Let's start with the boys. Typically, boys wear a suit. So suit jacket, a tie, collared shirt, dress pants, and dress shoes. Now, I understand there might be financial restrictions or difficulties, but we want to try to strive the best that we can to wear the very best that we can. A suit can be in any color. We've seen white suits, that's perfectly fine and appropriate. Black suit and tie, gray suits, blue suits, whatever color you like. I would give some advice for you, especially for the moms of and parents of boys. Buy a suit that you might be able to reuse in the future, because you know this, that they're not cheap, and you want to get as much out of it as you can. So if you have a wedding planned for later in the year, buy a suit that perhaps they'd be able to use at a later event. So for boys, suits, tie, preferably dress shoes, no sneakers, no sandals, flip-flops, or anything like that. For girls, of course, white is the traditional color for girls to wear, so a white First Communion dress. The length and style, the beading are all kind of up to you and your discretion. Of course, something that is dignified, something that is beautiful, something that is reflects the beauty of your daughters, but also the dignity of the event being at Mass. Girls are certainly welcome to wear veils on their heads. I would say, as a practical reminder, that 7-, 8-year-old girls tend to want to play with their veils, and so if it's something that's very big and burdensome and very complicated, just be careful. Perhaps you want to go for something maybe a little simpler, or something that your child is not going to have a difficult time during the Mass playing with something that would be on their head that they're perhaps not used to. But a veil is perfectly acceptable. if your daughter wants to wear high heels, I certainly wouldn't recommend it. The children are going to be walking down the center aisle at the start of Mass, and so we certainly don't want students, young girls, wearing shoes that they're not normally wearing or not normally comfortable with, that they might struggle with wearing and perhaps have a fall. So perhaps flats are better. But the only real restriction for girls, and for boys too, I suppose, would be that there should be nothing in their hands. So girls, no gloves. Boys, no Bibles to carry rosary beads. If they want to have a flower pinned on their suit, that's perfectly fine. But nothing in their hands. Their hands have to be free and clear, so no gloves, no items. You can have all of that for pictures before and after, but during the Mass, they should have nothing in their hands. Okay. Let's take a look at some of the practical details for the Masses and how they're going to go and how everyone's going to be seated and arranged within the church. Okay, so for each First Communion Mass, we want every child to arrive at least 20 minutes before their scheduled Mass. So if you're scheduled for 10 a.m., you should be arriving in the church basement in Hayes Hall by no later than 9:40. Okay, so 20 minutes before the start of your Mass, we want to make sure all the students are there. And where should they go? They should go down to the church basement to Hayes Hall. Okay, so that's where we're going to gather up all of the children to prepare them for going into the church. So we'll all start down there. Myself and the teachers will help organize them and have them prepared for how they're going to make the procession down into the church. From the back of the church, parents, after you drop off down in Hayes Hall, you're welcome to go up into the church, and then we can talk about the seating arrangement. So once the kids are dropped off down in Hayes Hall, Mom and Dad, you're welcome to go up into the church to get to your seats to prepare for Mass. Students are going to exit Hayes Hall through the back door, make their way up into the back of the church, and they'll process in with the priest and the altar servers at the beginning of Mass. And as they process into the church, they'll go down the center aisle and they'll make their way into the pews in the front left of the church, in front of the statue of Mary. So we'll have a reserved section just for the First Communion kids. So those kids will sit together as a class in the first 2 or 3 pews that we reserve, depending on the class size. 2 or 3 pews reserved in the front left of the church just for the students. Okay, so they'll process in at the start of Mass, they'll make their way, they'll sit together as a class with their teachers, and they'll celebrate the Mass together as a class. Now parents, where are you to sit? We will have some reserved seating for parents. So in the front right of the church, in front of the statue of St. Joseph, we'll have 6 to 8 pews reserved just for parents and siblings. And 2 or 3 pews immediately behind the students in the left side of the church. Again, pews reserved just for parents and siblings. So within the parents section that's reserved, again, I understand our culture, the idea of who constitutes parent and sibling sometimes is a little bit muddled sometimes, and I understand that. And so I leave it up to your discretion as parents and as family members to decide who constitutes a parent and a sibling to be there in that front section. And we want to be mindful that at each Mass, that it's not just about your particular child, but there's a whole class full of children. They all have their own families who are also there to celebrate. So we want to make sure we're being as respectful and as charitable as possible to all of the other families that are also there to celebrate this important occasion. So grandparents, great-grandparents, that crazy uncle from Idaho who's come to visit, perhaps they could find a spot behind. Now, if you're in the 7th pew that's not reserved, the pew that's immediately behind the parents section, I promise you it's still a great seat in the house. You'll still have a great view and be able to participate and see everything that's going to be celebrated there at the Mass. So parents, you'll have your own reserved seating in the front. Within that section, it is open seating, so we don't assign per family different pews or different areas that are allotted to particular names or families. Things become very difficult if you have a last name at the end of the alphabet. Perhaps we do alphabetically. You end up getting a worse seat than if your name was began with the earlier letters in the alphabet, or whatever system we were to do, there's someone who is going to be left out. So we leave that section open for you as parents to be able to go and arrive a little bit earlier and find the best seat that's available. But I promise you, all of the seats are going to be great. And again, it's not so much about where we're sitting, but we're there to celebrate the Mass, to celebrate what our Lord Jesus has done for us, and to witness and to celebrate with these children the first time they're going to receive the Eucharist, which of course is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. So that's really kind of the heart of things. So I understand that seating sometimes can be awkward and difficult, and who's going to sit where, but at the end of the day, none of that matters. What matters is Jesus Christ, and we can't lose sight of that. So keep that in mind. So the parents, you'll have your section reserved, kids will have their section reserved, and all of the other extended family and friends who are there to celebrate with us have open seating in the rest of the church. And so there'll be plenty of seating available for everyone there. Okay, a couple other practical details and things to consider. Number one, it is a Mass. It is a sacred celebration of the Eucharist. And so within that means that we want to treat the Mass itself in the most dignified way as possible. So today in our culture, everyone has in their pocket a very expensive and high-tech piece of photo equipment. Our phones can take wonderful pictures, and that's great. We want to take pictures of everything. However, during the Mass, we ask that everyone, parents, extended family, do not leave your pews to take pictures. It becomes a big distraction for the kids. It becomes a distraction for the priest. It turns the Mass into some sort of stage performance where we're there to take pictures, and it's not a concert. It's not an event where we want to be moving around. We want to treat this as truly a celebration of what our Lord has done for us in the sacred Eucharist. So with that said, we have hired a photographer who will be there to take pictures of all of the kids as they make their way up to the priest to receive Holy Communion for the first time. The photographer will have a designated lanyard on so you know who it is, and she'll be taking pictures of the students as they receive. Once we have those pictures as a parish, we'll make them available to you as parents free of charge. So you'll be able to get a really nice, clean, professional picture of your child receiving communion for the very first time. So you'll get that shot. So don't worry about trying to take out your phone or moving around to try to take a picture. Treat the moment with the prayerfulness and the respectfulness that it deserves, and really love your child through prayer and being with them in spirit as they receive and as you watch them and are there with them at the Mass. But don't worry about the pictures. We'll take care of the pictures for you and be able to give you the pictures free of charge. Okay, just a few last second things just to kind of look at. You may have had some experience in the past if you've ever had any other children make their first Holy Communion, or maybe you think back to your own first Holy Communion. But there is a tradition that exists in the church of making First Communion banners. Now, what is a First Communion banner? If you don't know what a First Communion banner is, take a look right here. That is what a First Communion banner is. It is a felt, decorative item that students will create that usually has something to do with their name as well as some symbols or images to remind them of their first communion. So maybe a chalice and a host, or wheat and wine, or grapes, things of that sort, just to kind of recall. It's a great decorative item. We will be having an event here. I'm not good with arts and crafts, but we will be having an event here which we call the Banner Retreat. So it'll be an opportunity for you as parents to come with your child one evening on Wednesday, April the 10th. And again, check the schedule that's been posted, so the details are there for the time and place. But Wednesday, April the 10th, from 7 to 8:30 in Hayes Hall. We'll provide all of the materials, so you don't have to worry about bringing anything, scissors, glue, felt, different sticky items. We'll provide all of that for you, but it's a great opportunity for you to come with your child for a very, very short presentation, and then we'll begin with the creative aspect of making a First Communion. And they make for nice keepsakes that you can keep at home. During the Mass, we'll have banners that you might want to bring back. So if you make the banner at the Banner Retreat, you can bring it home that night, bring it back on the morning of your First Communion, and then we'll hang them up and display them on the altar rail. So during the Mass, they'll be on display, and then after the Mass, you're welcome to take the banner home and to hang it up in your house, in their bedroom, to hold on to it however they would like to. But it's a nice opportunity, number one, for you as parents to work with your children to create this commemorative item to remember their first Holy Communion, and then we'll also decorate the church by hanging them up on the altar rail there. So that would be something to kind of mark your calendars with on Wednesday, April the 10th at 7 o'clock in Hayes Hall. So we'll have more details in the notes there for you for that. Okay, last little bullet points here is this. I mentioned this before, but really can't stress this enough. In these last couple of weeks before First Holy Communion, the best way to prepare for all of this is to go to Mass. Students who are regularly going to Mass, and not just going to Mass, but also paying attention and trying to engage and trying to sing the songs and to do the responses and to participate as fully as they can, truly have the best preparation possible. The classroom is fantastic. I love our catechists. They do a great job preparing the students, but the number one preparation they'll have is from you, Mom and Dad. The example that you set for them, the time that you spend sitting with them, praying with them, going to Mass with them, helping explain and encourage the faith to them, all of those things are incredibly important, and really nothing can substitute for that. So go to Mass, pray with your children, pray at night together. If it's something you haven't done before, you need to start now. In many ways, it's unfair to a second grader to not pray with them, to tell them to go to First Penance, to go to First Communion, but to never pray with them, to never bring them to Mass, to never show them the goodness of our faith and try to explain to them why we do what we do. If there's no intentional meaning behind it, all of this is just hollow, empty, ritualistic, cultural benchmarks that we come and we do it and then we leave, and it really doesn't have a purpose. But when we understand it and we engage, it becomes this incredibly beautiful and powerful experience. So I hope for you as parents it'll be something that you can truly put in your best effort. We want our children to do well in school. We sit and do homework with them. We want them to do well in sports. We practice with them basketball in the driveway. We give up our time and effort so that they can be the best that they can be in all of these other areas of their life. But the most important area of their life is their relationship with Jesus Christ. And if we're not willing to make that effort ourselves as parents to help them to become the best disciples of Christ, the best followers of Christ, so that they might go to heaven one day, it's truly the greatest failure that we'll ever have as parents. So I speak as a parent myself, and hopefully encouraging you as parents and reminding you of why this is so important. Without Jesus Christ, without having God at the center of this is it's just a waste of time, to be perfectly honest. It's just empty ritual. But Christ is here, God is here, and He wants good things from us as adults, and especially also from our children as we're preparing for the sacrament. So with that being said, if you have any questions or comments or things that you would like for us to be able to clarify or to be able to offer something that's very specific to your family, please, please, please do not hesitate to reach out. I'm always willing to answer any questions that you might have, whether through email or calling the parish office. Father Zig, Father Matt, Father Shrillo, the same way, are happy to answer any question that you might have. So with that said, thank you for allowing us to share some of these thoughts via video. We knew having a meeting in person would be ideal, but sometimes schedules don't allow for that, and so we thought this might be the best way to be able to get information to you in a slightly more interactive way. So thank you for watching, enjoy your rest of the day, and hope to see you all at First Penance and of course at First Communion. God bless.